poppin' today, where things are poppin', the Philadelphia way.
1952 was a year of racial tension, clean-cut lifestyles, and only one socially acceptable type of music. With the ending of World War II, parents attempted to shield their children from hardship. Image was everything in this formal society. Children and teenagers were expected to behave and respect tradition.
The Beatles came on, and they were on Ed Sullivan. They sang, "She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah." Now my mother looked at that and said, "It's not yeah, it's yes."
White people firmly set themselves above African Americans. Rock and roll was starting to develop, and teenagers quickly became obsessed with it. But it was widely regarded by parents as the stuff of the devil. With the baby boom underway, the mass of teenagers began to look for a way to express themselves. They found this through music and dance. In Baltimore, on October 7, 1952, the show American Bandstand was introduced as a replacement for a weekday movie special. It began as a show that played new music, but it was quickly changed into a dance show. Its success was instantaneous.
We're going hoppin' today, where things are poppin', a Philadelphia way. We're gonna drop it on all the music they play on the bandstand.
Parents in the 1950s set out a formal lifestyle that teenagers could finally rebel against. American Bandstand was revolutionary in the music it introduced and how influential the young community became. It finally showed the world that teens and preteens could dictate the outcome of music history.
It was a newfound power. It was the first teenage revolution in this country, and we were all a part of it. It was wonderful.
American Bandstand also began a revolution against the age-old idea that teenagers are out to screw things up. We're still battling with this idea that has been ingrained in society for too long, that teenagers aren't responsible and can't influence a nation. American Bandstand was one of the first shows to show the world that teenagers aren't out to hurt anyone, and that they have the power to change history, even if it's only through a few songs and dances.
Okay, these kids are not going to, destroy the world. They're just out to dance and have a good time and party.
One of the reasons for the show's success was the clean-cut, responsible host, Dick Clark. But because Clark was such a powerful businessman, he proved once and for all to the music industry that pop was for kids, and a powerful industry could be built upon that.
The thing about Dick Clark is that he was a clean-cut, good-looking guy. And he was coming on, basically civilizing this very scary music.
Before this show, people thought that rock music wasn't acceptable for all audience or any occasion. Now we see rock music playing during commercials, sports games, and grocery stores. Dick Clark changed the face of rock and roll by selling youth music to the world in an appealing way for both parents and teenagers.
I think Dick Clark's legacy is bigger than American Bandstand. What he did with American Bandstand was to allow the general population to see rock and roll as a culturally valid art form. More than Ed Sullivan, more than anybody else, he put this stamp on it that said, this is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, so we're going to celebrate it.
American Bandstand was the first show that truly empowered teenagers to become independent by introducing teenage dancers. These people were envied, loved, almost worshipped by huge masses of fans. They became instant celebrities and role models for the viewers.
Everybody that walked through those green doors became a star.
Perhaps one of the most popular features on the show was the performances of popular artists.
This is Kiss.
Mr. Michael Jackson.
Stevie Wonder. The Jackson. Jerry Lee Lewis. Great Balls of Fire.
Before American Bandstand, the only place you could go to see your favorite performers was by going to their concerts. Dick Clark would interview the artists that appeared on the show, adding a level of intimacy to different singers. Kids on the show could vote on certain records they believed were going to become a hit, causing people to become interested in new music. This attraction allowed teens and adults of the time period to actually see the bands that they loved. During the time period when Bandstand aired, the civil rights movements and racial tensions were reaching a peak.
In the 1950s, it was literally an aquifer of hot lava that was underneath the surface, and it was always there, and no one talked about it, and it started to boil up in places like music.
American Bandstand was also the first show to have African American dancers and artists. The instant outrage from viewers was explosive.
So when somebody turned on American Bandstand and saw blacks and whites dancing together, it was horrendous. How could this happen?
Dick Clark took a very radical view on integration of the show. In his 1976 autobiography, Rock and Roll and Remember, Clark said Bandstand was a segregated show for years. It became integrated in 1957 because I elected to make it so. I was also aware that rock and roll and bandstand owed their existences to black music and black artists who sang it. In this statement, Dick Clark is very careful about only mentioning the artists. It wasn't until a 1994 interview with Rolling Stone that the truth came out. Dick Clark had only integrated the dancers. In the early days of the show, the audience had been segregated as the rest of the country.
You couldn't sit whites and blacks together in that audience. You would have had to put them in the back.
It was in this interview that Dick Clark explained why he had taken so long to integrate the audience. We knew as we went on with the show, and it got to be seen nationally, segregation couldn't be.
It didn't really so much break down barriers as it made us aware, especially kids, aware of this whole new culture.
The lasting impact of American Bandstand stems from the influence rock and roll had on all the music industry and the nation during the time. The show was a major musical platform for artists to share music that would be carried around the country.
So the music that was made in Philadelphia and South Philly became a part of the whole country.
Bandstand's lasting effects can be seen on TV today. They're found in places like American Idol, The Voice, and other musical shows. These musical TV contests spawned from the basic idea of American Bandstand, that the outcome of music history can be shaped by a population of people. Also, a revival of Bandstand created by Ryan Seacrest and Dick Clark himself was put on as a rendition of a dance contest that used to be on the show. This revival turned into a televised dance contest we now know as So You Think You Can Dance. Other revivals include Dancin' on Air, a show based in Philadelphia that features teenagers dancing to the hits of today. As well as many big changes in the time period, Bandstand was revolutionary in many little aspects as well, including their
They were
logo.
the first program I remember that really made sense of a logo. I mean, if you think of that A, B sort of logo that they had.
No other person was as good as branding as Dick Clark was. He began the trend of branding everything to make the show successful, and it worked.
American Bandstand is probably the most branded show that there ever was.
Now we see branding everywhere. Everything has a logo and everything had merchandise to go along with it.
And I'll jump and hit, I may even show 'em my handstand. Because I'm on the American Bandstand. When we dance real slow, I'll show all the guys in the grandstand. What a swinger I am on American Bandstand. We're going hopping today where things are popping. The Philadelphia way, we're gonna drop in on all the music they play on the bandstand. Bandstand, 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 bandstand. Well, you know, here's the show, ready to go. What a pro! Hey, you're making my mark.
Right here on Bandstand.
Bandstand.